Oh, the one I just met?
Welcome, everyone. It's a great pleasure to see you all here. It's always good at the beginning to wait a few minutes while the energy level, as we all look at each other and anticipate the event tonight. But I think it's about time we begin. I'm Angela Miles. I coordinate the Dame Nita Barrow Distinguished Visitorship here, which is based in the Center for Women's Studies and Education at OISE UT. Roxana Ng, who's the current head of the center, deeply regrets that she can't be here to introduce Andrea, Chrisjohn, and Patricia. But I'm sure she's here with us in spirit. This is the 15th annual Dame Nita Barrow Lecture. And we're very pleased Patricia can be with us here, and that Andrea Chrisjohn can introduce her. Before I introduce Andrea, let me cover a few other things. This visitorship, this lecture, is co-sponsored by the International Human Rights Program of the University of Toronto, and it is supported by the International Development Resource Center, which really has been a much valued, not only supporter but partner over the years with the wonderful visitors that we've been able to have here. In 2002, Rita Tapa was our visitor from Nepal, and on a number of occasions we have been able to sell crafts from her many important projects around peace and youth and supporting women here at this event. And Elizabeth Wickwire, who was a student of hers and based her master's research on projects with Rita, has a table outside if any of you are interested. It won't be at the reception, but it's here now if you're interested in buying that. Another important activity that has stemmed from our visitorship is the International Women's Human Rights Education Institute that's based at the Center for Women's Studies and Education, and annually has a 6-week international workshop on women's human rights. And Angela Lytle, who's been very supportive in this program today, and coordinates that visitorship, that institute, International Women's Human Rights Education Institute, is here if you'd like to talk with her or have any questions. At the end of this lecture, we'll have the contact information, the slides with websites and contact information for the Center for the International Women's Human Rights Education Institute and so on. We are able and pleased to be able to invite everyone to a reception following this lecture, which will be at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, which is just up the road toward Bloor, just across Bloor from Devonshire. And it will be on the second floor of OISE, and I'm sure that the wonderful volunteers for this event will be placed in such a way as to take you there and point the way. Which brings me that I would like to very much thank those who are responsible for this evening's functioning and spirit as well. Andrea Weerdenberg in the pink there has coordinated the volunteers and taken a large part of the responsibility for this event. She's worked very, very closely and under the guidance of Jamie Rickman, who may or may not be she may be outside doing important things. Jamie is the coordinator of the Center for Women's Studies and Education, and available with contact information you'll get from the slides, but also on the second floor at OISE. And they have worked with Yves Dufour. If you're in the hall and not rushing around doing important things, do stand and identify yourselves. Yves, thank you. Ibru Bag, there she is. Soni Tapa, very valued associate with the Center for Women's Studies and Education. Kari Dreyer, over there at the back. Suraj Sarma will be taking photographs and looking after the videotaping. This lecture will be podcast on the Center for Women's Studies and Education website, as are a number of previous visitors' talks. I forget what year we began podcasting. The earlier years, we have hard copies of the lectures that are available, which we're very, very pleased to do. Have I forgotten any volunteers? If so, they won't speak up, so you have to tell about them. Without further ado, let me say how incredibly pleased we are that Andrea Chrisjohn has been able to introduce Patricia. We feel it's very, very important that Patricia is here with us during the period that we have a TRC here in Canada, and a TRC that should not only help with healing, but should leave no Canadians, First Nations or otherwise, with an untransformed sense of our country and the challenges and the ways we need to know each other and be together in this country. So even though we aren't presenting Patricia as an expert on the process here, we feel that there is an important connection, learning, and relationship with her visit and that process. Andrea is from the Oglala Bear Clan family of the Onondaga of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. She is board designate and treasurer for the Toronto Council Fire, where she's been involved for 25 years, working for the cultural development of First Nations people to revise the damage of assimilation. And since the late 1990s, she's been involved in residential school issues and process of healing and education. And more recently, and why we feel that it's meant to be that she's here with us this evening and that we can begin and continue a dialogue, she has been involved in community-based and community-driven TRC process out of the Toronto Council Fire, which was begun when the official TRC process was so delayed, that and is in the spirit of activism and community, and to build a future that really is respectful of all and based on a justice and dignity and mutual recognition. So without further ado, I would like to ask Andrea to come up to the microphone.
Sigole, yo dagwas new gets okwali newagi dalora on your aga new go joda. I'm just acknowledging you and each of you in terms of your families and all those before you, and to welcome you here to this evening. I think one of the things that's really critical for myself as Onya Da'ak, which is part of the Haudenosaunee, is that we always identify who we are, that our connections to the land first, because we say the mother is our land, and that's who we are first. And so before I actually get into the introduction of Patricia, this very beautiful lady who's with us for the next little while, is that I did ask some questions because I wanted to know who she was and where she came from in terms of our clan and our nation. And so Patricia tells me she comes from the Luya and the nation, and has since married in to the Kizi people, and I think that's really critical and important, and also to acknowledge that she's a mother and a wife, a mother of three, and a wonderful partner that she has with her. So I want to make sure that's really critical first before I do the actual Western process of introduction. So you all have your programs in front of you, but I'll do it a little bit better justice in terms of how well I feel and honored to actually introduce Patricia. Her name is pronounced, her last name is pronounced Nyaundi. And again, as I said this afternoon, we had an opportunity to meet her that it's important when we introduce to one another that we don't accept anything less than who we are, and that's why it's really critical to make sure that I'm actually introducing to her name. So Patricia is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with 21 years work experience. She holds a Master's of Law in Human Rights from the University of Cape Town, South Africa, and has distinguished herself internationally as a champion for women's rights. And I say I won't go for that. Patricia served as the Chief Executive Officer, Secretary of the Kenyan Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission from February 2010 and to this past August of 2012. She's just been appointed Chief Executive Officer of the Kenyan National Commission of Human Rights and begins her tenure upon her return to Kenya in December for that. So I want to acknowledge that first of all. So, and to say to her congratulations. And again, in terms of 2003, she has co-founded the Child Legal Aid Center. During her time there, the center worked through litigation and advocacy to create awareness on the newly implemented Children's Act. She's a member of the Advisory Committee of Equality Effect, a joint Canadian-African female lawyer initiative aimed at using the law to improve the status of rights and women. I found that really hard to understand, but that's during her term as executive director of the Federation of Women's Lawyers in Kenya, from 2008 to 2010, the organization was instrumental in championing the constitutional provisions that improve the legal status of women in Kenya. In her lecture, she will draw on her work at the Truth Commission to explore how truth commissions can be a useful tool for advancing women's rights. So without further ado, I also want to acknowledge this very beautiful lady and another sister as part of this universe that we can share the stage and have an opportunity to interact. And I look forward to having her come back to our side of the world and to interact with our women from the Longhouse and reconcile some of the processes that we do with our nation. So I ask you to join me in welcoming her.
Thank you and good evening. People introduce you as Andrea has done, and you begin to wonder whether that is a person you see every morning in the mirror. But because she said such kind words, I will accept and glow in that introduction. Oh, thank you. You know what, I was avoiding coming here because given my height advantages, I was not very sure that you would know who was talking to you, but I have looked at you, and since your eyes are in this direction, I kind of get a sense that you have located where I am standing. Thank you very, very much. I think if I began thanking the people who have been as warm as Canada has been cold, I would take up all the time that has been assigned for the lecture. But really, allow me just to take a few moments to appreciate certain individuals who have made me feel that it can be cold on the outside, but they'll keep you warm. I would like to thank very much, first of all, Andrea and Eve and Angela Miles. I have just seen Sujata and Angela Lytle. You know, when you arrive in a new environment and the first people who meet you greet you with such a smile, it makes all the difference. And that is what those ladies have done for me. I would also want to thank 6 ladies who every Wednesday have made, you know, I think my calendar only shows the Wednesdays ever since September 8th when I arrived in this country. And these are the 6 ladies who have stayed in my class. I would really want to appreciate each of you, and to see you here, I really want to thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank very much Angela Miles. I was introduced to her by Fiona Sampson, and she said, okay, I'll put you in touch with Professor Miles. So when I was introduced, you heard that I do have a master's. I want to assure you that all my life, education has been a very painful experience. And sometimes I blame it on the professors. So it has nothing to do with me. So when I had Professor, instinctively, like a porcupine, I grew defensive. But her first mail to me, she signed it off as Angie. And I said, this is a very good sign. And I want to assure you that because of my upbringing, where we are trained to show respect to title and position, and especially when that combines with seniority, I have been wrestling, but not too aggressively, with being informal with Angie. And she almost makes me feel like I could stay in Canada for 1 more week. Emphasis, of course, is on the almost. I still do not feel that way. And then, of course, because I am Kenyan, there is the wonderful Kenyan community. As I say this, I am assured that you will judge me, but I will go ahead and say it. The way to my heart is through my stomach. And so my Kenyan friends have made sure that though I have traveled so far, the kitchen is always just around the corner. and I have had more than my fair share of, and you can tell by what is peeping from the sides of this podium, that is still part of me, that they have taken good care of me. I must confess that I am particularly delighted to see Kenyans from Abeingo. Abeingo in my mother tongue means the people of home. So the Abeingo are where I was born, and Andrea said the Luya. So mwebare muno 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 handi muno. And because I have seen the community into which I am married raising their eyebrows, I will say mbiamono, naende mbiamono. So let there be peace. Again, I want to thank Andrea. There is nothing that sounds as good as when someone takes the time to pronounce your name right. I remember one time at the airport, I almost missed a flight because they were announcing for Patricia Nyaundi or something like that. And I thought, why is this person being called so many times? And then I found out it was me. So thank you very, very, very much. Well appreciated. I want to thank each one of you, and I wish I could say it by name. But what I will do is I will look around the room, and the look on my face, I am not very sure, but let me say it is a smile, regardless of what it looks like. So when I look at you and I smile, I am saying thank you very, very much for coming out this evening and allowing me to recount here my experiences with the Kenyan Truth Commission, what, in my opinion, is a very important process. And just to share and affirm again for myself that if I was asked to, I would do it a second time, only differently and better. Allow me to start the story at the beginning. Kenya was birthed in December of 1963. I am proud to say that I was not there. I arrived a few years later. Not a few, but many years later. That doesn't sound good. But I am told, are the colors there? So I'll just go back. I am told that as the flag was raised, there were tears of joy because the struggle for independence had been intense and passionate. And therefore, as Kenyans gathered and the flag was being raised and the Union Jack was being lowered, my father tells me that he wept. Well, he tells me that one reason that he wept was that now he could of right wear trousers wherever he wished to. Prior to that, he had to wear shorts, or as we call them, kaptulas. They also sound terrible. But he had to wear shorts to remind him that although he was a grown man, he was not independent. And therefore, as the flag was raised, the thought in his mind was that this is now my country and I can now wear trousers. When the flag was raised, it was not just a piece of cloth with colors, but each color was part of this story that excited the nation. The black stood for majority. And now Kenyans were saying that as black people in our country, as the majority, we shall be in control of our destiny. The red stood for the sacrifices that had been made for this independence. And it was a constant reminder that independence had not come cheap, and it was going to be treasured. The green stood for the fruits of independence. Part of the struggle of independence had centered around ownership and control of land. And therefore, there was general excitement in the country that now the land is ours. We own it, and we can do that which pleases with us. It was a very exciting moment. The shield was a statement, the shield and the arrows was a statement that we would protect this independence. We would guard it, whatever it took. Never again would we be a subjugated nation. And the white stood for the values that we would move forward with, which were peace and justice. What a powerful moment. So it was a day of hope. When I was in high school, and you will indulge me, I had this, creative mind, and I always felt that it was not enough to hear about stories. I also needed to dramatize them in my mind. So allow me to dramatize what must have happened in Kenya soon after independence. So on December 12th, there was this big party. Men and women and children gathered at the stadium, and the flag was raised up, and the talk was, we as a country, we as a people, we as a nation are independent. My suspicion is that this must have gone on until around the 15th. You know how parties can go on? And I am sure this was not just a small party. I want to think that around the 16th or the 18th of December 1963, the excitement had begun, to come down, and people were saying, now that we are independent, what happens? I want to narrow it down to a family. And probably in this family, people were discussing. And the father was saying, oh, now we will enjoy. I can now go and apply for that job in Nairobi. Oh, now I know where our land is. We will go take possession of it. Oh, and now we can go to those good schools. And then the girls in the family also spoke up and said, oh, Daddy, does this mean I can also go to school? Then her father must have said, oh, no. We do not have enough resources. Your brother will go first. Or maybe the father responded and said, should I really invest in the education of a girl? Is that a good use of my limited resources? I am just independent. I do not have enough resources. And she's going to get married. And whatever I would have invested will be transferred to the other family. In another family, as the discussions about land were going on, I am sure some girl popped up and said, wow, so Dad, This 20 acres is all ours? Can I get that corner where we have fruits? You know, Dad, how much I love oranges. And the daddy told her, no. Girls do not inherit land in our community. And I think when women met at the marketplace and girls, they would have asked, so what did independence mean? When we were celebrating on December 12th, did that include us? I am thinking that some girl somewhere who was just due for circumcision, when she heard there was going to be independence, would say, oh, thank God, it's not going to happen to me. We are now independent, and people understand that what is wrong will not happen to you because you're independent. Oh, poor girl. Just like her sisters before her, in independent Kenya, she did go for circumcision. And on and on and on. 1963, 1964, 1965. Maybe in 1962, there was a lady who had been incessantly abused by her husband. And as the talk of independence was building up, she said, finally, I think I'm going to rest from all this. Because the talk about independence suggests to me that there will be no more tears. It's going to be happiness. So when on the 16th of December, her husband assaulted her because the vegetables were burnt or she did not serve meat, she rushed off to the chiefs and said, my husband has beaten me, and it's an independent Kenya. And the chief asked her, what did you do? She said, the vegetables burnt, but I was also bringing in the cow and putting, making sure that food for the children was ready and all these other chores that I have to do. And because of that, somehow the vegetables got burnt. It is women like you who cannot hear through their ears. You will hear through your skin. That is what the chief must have told her. So this is what the women of Kenya lived with in the independent Kenya from 1963. And when they asked, why? You told us that we were now an independent nation. They were reminded, yes, we are independent, but we are first and foremost Africans. And you must never forget your culture. When I came here to South Africa, as I have said, Angie has been very good to me, and she invites me to places. So one time she invited me to Sheila's house, and we had this very sumptuous meal. I have told you the way to my heart is through my stomach. So Sheila went on the express lane. And after we had had this meal, we got ready to leave. And Angie said, you know what? I have a walking stick, which I can't carry on my bike. Would you be so kind to bring it? And I said, oh, sure. Why not? A walking stick. It's not heavy. And so she gave me the walking stick, which I have here with me today. And when I held it, something went through me. Because it occurred to me it was a man's walking stick. Actually, Angie called it a cane. But when I held it, it was very clear to me that it was a man's walking stick. And, well, I am here in Toronto, but I am first and foremost an African woman. And I know my place. And I have no business holding, and I'm even holding it wrong, a man's walking stick. Why is it a man's walking stick? Because it has a handle. I'll be honest. I think today I am going to be honest. It gave me great pleasure to hold a man's walking stick, because there is also a woman's walking stick. The woman's walking stick is, the woman's walking stick is a straight stick. It has no handle. And normally she would use it when she's advanced in years to support herself with. So, well, these are the sticks you have in Canada. This is what I found. So this is what she would be looking like. So when I made my way with the man's walking stick, I kind of got carried away. If you will allow me, so it was just so much. The man's walking stick. And you know what? I was looking around and said, will anyone get shocked? I think people were shocked because I am told, actually today when I asked Brian, can I use your walking stick? He asked, have you hurt your leg? I said, no. So I got carried away and I was swinging. You see, this one doesn't swing as well. This one swings very well. And you know, the other thing that I did, I just had fun. I said, it's good to be in Canada. The other thing I did that I wouldn't do in Kenya while swinging walking was I whistled. Women do not whistle. So I was on the streets of Canada. Oh my. But just so that I don't confuse you, I will now stay with the woman's walking stick. Just so that you remember that I am a woman. I then rang my dad because I said, this thing that excited me so much, I need to understand it. And I asked my dad, Dad, is it just a figment of my imagination? Or is there any significance in the walking stick? You know, sometimes when you think you're educated, you confuse issues. So I asked him, Dad, is it accurate that there is the man's walking stick and a woman's walking stick? And he said, yes. And I asked him, what's the difference? He said, a man's walking stick expresses his authority. So a firm no, you get it from the walking stick. And when he's walking around, he's communicating that I am the protector. I'm a big man, I'm a strong man. So, what business does a woman have
getting hold of a man's walking stick. She's not a provider. She's not a protector. She has no power. This is an expression of power. So you do not have power. I asked, Dad, are you saying a woman would never, ever be allowed to carry the man's walking stick? She says, well, when she's a widow, she can walk with her husband's stick. That is now her husband. And she can also wear his shirt and his coat when he's dead. So, because mine is very much alive, let me go back to the women's walking stick. But I must say that when I, walked with this cane on the streets of Toronto, it impressed me how in our culture it is not enough to say, I am a man or I am a woman. But even the most innocent thing can be converted, and then it is set aside for manhood, and women cannot enter there. I deliberately did not ask how much time we have this evening. I will warn you that any time before morning is evening, just so that you get a sense of how long I may talk. But just to say that things never got better for women in Kenya. And the situation got worse and worse and worse. As at 2007, studies showed that 6 out of 10 women are exposed to one or other form of domestic violence. From 1973, there were attempts to introduce in Kenya legislation that would protect women from domestic violence. The response to that by a male-dominated parliament was, do women really mind being beaten? It is an expression of a man who is paying attention. And women will tell you that when you went crying back to your mother and said, it has happened, he beat me, or he's been unfaithful, your own mother would say, my daughter, how do you think I live with your father? Go back. That is the nature of men. He only slapped you. That is nothing. Go back and cook for your children. So increasingly, the violence and the other violations against women had been normalized. Almost to a stage where one could say that that is our lot. We will accept it. At the same time, as I have said, there was this expectation with independence. What had happened with Kenya is that when we were carrying out the negotiations around independence, these were conducted in London. I have not been there, but I'm told there's a place called Lancaster. So the Lancaster Conference. I am told that one woman went there, Priscilla Abwao, but she was not allowed to speak. And that can let you know then what kind of constitution women got coming out of Lancaster. Now, the Kenyan nation that was formed then protected the elite. And so over the years, there was this tension in Kenya between those who had some advantage and those who did not have. There was building tension between the various communities in the Kenyan country. We have 43 tribes, and among those 43, there are further divisions. So each of us got into this conversation that said, because you have, I do not have. And tensions were building up until in 2007, there was this big explosion. I saw this and I kind of liked it. I kept looking at it and said, I wish it could light up and explode, but it will not. So in 2007, we had an election in Kenya, and there was a disputed presidential election results. And this was a trigger of the pent-up frustration within the country. In 2002, there had been what we thought was a democratic election and this great expectation that now Kenya was on the path to recovery. So when things deteriorated still in 2007, I think people said, there is just no chance here. Those who are sitting will continue sitting on others. And so in 2007, Kenyan against Kenyan. Now there was a crisis because there was a conflict up there. From 1963, women had been having this conversation that, you know what, this independence just does not sound right. We know we celebrated, but this independence, we do not think we got independence. But no one listened. But in 2007, an opportunity availed itself. Now we are serious. Oh my goodness. Properties have been destroyed. We've got to come together as a nation. What? The railways have been yanked? This is terrible. A nation cannot go on in this matter. Let's do something about this. What? People have been displaced from their land, including men who hold title, legal title over that land? Oh no. Something has got to be done and done now. So we sat at the negotiating tables. Many processes were created. And one of them is that which I was privileged to serve on, the Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission. As you can see, there is the sun rising there. And therefore, the Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission was to give Kenyans a new hope, a new dawn. We were set up to inquire into historical injustices and gross violations that had occurred in the past. And with what objective? To ensure that these violations would never happen again, and that we would make recommendations, both legislative and institutional, to guarantee that never again would Kenyans be displaced from their homes. Never again would Kenyans be detained. Never again would we be talking of extrajudicial killings. And the language was very good. It said, you must create a complete and accurate picture of historical injustices and gross violations of human rights. And hence the title of my lecture, same song, different notes. If I was bolder than I am, I would sing you a song. But I know the limitations that I have there. So I will spare you, and I will not sing you a song. But music is a useful learning tool. I remember that is how I learned the alphabet, through song. So we used to say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. And this was my best part. L, M, N, O, P, Q. L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. This I did at around age 6, 7. Now, when I went to write, I just didn't know what Elomeno. I knew A, B, C, but Elomeno was kind of a challenge. So music is very good as a way of helping you to learn what could have been very difficult. For many of us, we went to school never having spoken English, and this poor teacher had got to help you, so you can imagine her training you to talk English, and all you knew was your mother tongue. So they put everything to song. And that is what human rights had become, a song. We sang our national anthem. Our national anthem has very powerful words. It says, "O God of all creation," including women. I learned when I went to school that there was the 1948 UN Declaration for Human Rights, which every opening sentence it says, all people, everyone. And you could say that of all the human rights instruments that we celebrate. So it had become a song. But experience had taught us now that when we are talking about women and their inclusion in society, then we need to invest in another dictionary, because all does not mean all, and everyone does not mean everyone. So we could say, for instance, the Universal Declaration for Human Rights protects every person from cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. But when you try and apply that to domestic violence, everyone does not include women. Because as far as the women's situation is concerned, it's part of their culture. This is the way we do things. This is who we are. And that is the response we had had over the years. And therefore, when we got into the Truth Commission, we said, indeed, it is the same song. All, everyone, complete, accurate. But we will sing it with different notes. Those of you who enjoy music know it is all about tempo. And sometimes a good song will sound bad because of the way it is sung. And a bad song may also sound good because of the way it is sung. So we said that although the Truth Commission and the manner in which it was conceived may have excluded women again, we would sing that song, but with different notes. And so when they said violations, we said the violations that women suffer are not just the violations that they suffer from the government, but the violations that they suffer in their homes. And therefore, we will expand that space. We said that the Truth Commission was designed so that you would have to come and tell your truth publicly, and yet this would keep women away. So we said we would have special sessions for women, and they could come in this safe space and tell their story. And the women came. Is that clear? the Kenyan women came before the Truth Commission and they told their story. They said, look, it is not violence. It is not because of the violence that we suffer. But this is our lot in life. It is almost a curse to be born a woman. A woman who was displaced and found herself in Uganda said, not only did I lose my home, but I was sexually violated. And now our children refer to us as those women who were raped. That is our story. And so these women came and they told the commission that we are Kenyans too. We are also Kenyans. And we want you, as a commission, to make sure that the black for the majority includes the women. That when we talk of the Kenyan nation and we say it is about rule by the majority, then it includes women. When you talk about treasuring the sacrifices that were made so that we could get this independence, then the records of the country must also include the sacrifices that were made by women over the years. The Kenyan narrative on independence is about the men who went into the fields and the struggles that they had and the way that they were detained. But there is the other story of the women who were left to fend for their families within a culture that said women cannot own land, women cannot work, but she still had to put food on the table. Recognize that sacrifice. That is what those women said. The fruits of independence, we want to be assured. For a long time, courts in Kenya had said that for a woman to be entitled to matrimonial property, what she would establish is that she was in a marriage, and there was therefore no need to prove actual financial contribution. The recognition was, the acknowledgement was that there are so many other things that women do, and that therefore there was no need to demand on them, because maybe it is different here in the north, but in where I come from, no one keeps records of what they've done in the home. So, well, if I buy milk, the receipt doesn't find its way to the house. If I buy tomatoes, no receipts are given at the market. So, and these are the things that women do. But in 2007, there was a great reversal that said for a woman to be entitled to property, she had to show actual financial contribution. What this meant is that women could forget, especially, I always say that, you know, marriage sometimes can step in the way of advancement. So if you were single, it meant you could acquire property in your own name. But if you are married, it is not a very good thing for you as a married woman to be walking around with titles showing that you own land. That is a statement on your part that you are not taking your marriage as seriously as you should. So many women will contribute towards the purchase of property, but have it registered in their husband's name, because that is the proper thing to do. So what women were saying, look, we want to also enjoy the fruits of independence. in terms of what are the jobs we are getting? What is the value given to our work? What are the guarantees we have of our humanness? And then, very importantly, that shield right there in the center of the flag, we also want to know that our rights will be protected. We want to know that no one will tell us that because your culture is conflicting with your rights, then forget about your rights. So what the Kenyan women were saying is we too want to be part of this republic. And if you don't mind, we as women, well, would also be very happy to be walking and whistling with this cane. Just so that we know that it is something that gives you support. It is not a symbol of power. I think what women were saying, look, this country is big enough for all of us if we are prepared to accept that we are as human as the males and we are entitled to be treated as human beings. The women said, we are not asking for something new, something that had not been conceived of, but it is right there in one of the symbols of our nation, in our flag, a statement of inclusivity. So please be true to the ideals upon which this country was founded. I would like to pray that in the days to come, the Kenyan women will indeed enjoy the true fruits of independence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very, very much, Patricia. That was very, very powerful. I think women in Canada can recognize the things you're talking about. They take different forms, but nowhere are women full citizens. And the work that you've done there and are continuing to do is really, as with so many of the Dame Nita Barrow visitors, an inspiration to us. The women we invite to be distinguished visitors here are really inspirational leaders and feminists. We have some time for questions and discussion, and if you feel happy to take the questions and stay up here without me, we can do it that way. You can collect a few and then do that. We don't go on very late here because we do have the reception that we want to invite people to. There's Patricia, by the way, I should mention Patricia will also be speaking on a panel on November 29th at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, 7 to 9 p.m. on the 12th floor. It's called Problematizing Truth Commissions and Transitional Justice. And Patricia will be there with speakers from Guatemala and Iran. So there'll be some discussions of truth commissions. And you can get that information from the Center for Women's Studies in Education, whose contact info I'll put up after we have the question and answers. Thank you. Do you want to take your... Which you prefer? You would like me? Okay. Our visitors vary in their preferences for taking questions or not, but if you're sure, okay. Let's take a few questions or comments and then have Patricia respond. And we have microphones here, and this will be podcast, and the sound is important, so do go to the microphones if you would like to make a comment. And you can say who you are, please.
My name is Dominique, and I'm an author, translator, proofreader, and I have a degree in international affairs, and I'm very interested in women's studies, so that's why what I'm doing here. And one thing that people often talk about in women's rights outside Canada and what we call the Western world is, oh, you know, it could be worse. A lot of women don't want to change. You know, not all women want Western values like freedom or whatever you want, you know. What do you say to people who try and tell you things like that there are women who don't want their freedom? Maybe you've met women who are opposed to change. To what degree do you encounter that opposition to change from women themselves, and what's your reaction to it?
Thank you. Margaret.
Hi, my name is Margaret Eichler. Thank you very much for your speech. It was very moving. How many women were on the commission, and how did you get the men to actually take an inclusive stance so that they would understand that Kenyans come in two versions?
Anyone else? These are both large questions. So while people are deciding if they want to ask a question, Patricia can respond to that.
Sometimes this issue comes up here with respect to culture versus women's rights when we're dealing with minority cultures, especially immigrant minority cultures. And so I face this a lot. I'm a lawyer and I work in family violence issues in family law. And how do we get around that? Because that issue comes up here because everyone wants to be sensitive to people's cultures, but then they shy away from addressing the issues that are within those cultures. And so a lot of times one is told that because it is one's culture, that women are supposed to conform to the culture. And I really liked what you said about, we also want our human rights as well.
Thank you. I think I will go with the first one. The greatest challenge indeed has been when the opposition comes from women. And they say, this is our life. Like I have said, when you go back to your mother and you say, Mom, this happened, and she's the one who sends you back and says that is the nature of life. If you look at female circumcision, the ceremony for girls is organized by the women. So I think in terms of violation, no one is suggesting that women are the innocent parties. But having been a practitioner in human rights, I can assure you that when a way out is offered, a way out that works, then we take it. The truth is you cannot assume that the woman who says, I am okay with this, is making that choice independently. Okay? Because she's probably thinking, so yes, I will say I oppose female circumcision, but that means my daughter will not get married. And I can assure you that marriage means a lot in our communities. It is how you are identified. Up to a stage, we will celebrate your girlness. Is that English? But then, at some point, you will see concern because you have to move into the next phase as you grow into the community. So there's all these issues. And so even when women are told, look, you have accepted it, a woman will accept to stay in a violent relationship because that's how she's taking her children to school. She does not want to rock the boat because back home we have green paper bags. I have now been educated that they are plastic bags. We call them paper bags. So we have green plastic bags I am not by any chance suggesting that this is what I have been doing part of the time, but about the size of what I have seen at Winners. So, so when a woman is being forced out of her matrimonial home, her earthly possessions will fit into that green or Winners paper bag. And regardless of the number of years you have put into that marriage, that is what you will be living with. So tell me how that woman cannot choose to stay in a violent relationship. I cannot resist to say this. Others have heard me say this before. Every time people tell me, oh, those are Western values. In Africa, these things are very clearly defined. I always tell those who tell me that, okay, you put on your skin, get rid of your shoes, get rid of whatever other Western pollution you are wearing or enjoying, and then come to me as a truly African man with a spear in one hand and a dead lion lying in your wake. Then I will listen to you as an African woman. But when you're wearing, now I know where those suits come from. When you're wearing those suits that are so sharp, you know, if someone passes near you, they could get bruised. Enjoying the full benefits of westernization, riding around in a good car, not having to walk, having a mobile phone that you not only can talk on, but take pictures and also have a diary on. Oh, please, don't tell me about Western values. So that is how I deal with that, because I believe that there is no culture that can possibly say that it is right to dehumanize another human being. I spoke somewhere earlier today and I said I have been in existence for close, if I want to lie about it, I'll say close to 40 years. If I want to be honest, I'll say closer to 50 years. I am yet to see anyone who celebrates pain. I am yet to see someone who says, oh, well, it's fine, I understand that I will not go to school because of my culture. Many people are suppressed. It is a consent that is coerced out of us. And I just remembered that is why even in Kenya now, the highest rate of increase in terms of HIV infection is among women in heterosexual marriages. But publicly we say that home is best. At the commission, we had 4 female commissioners and 5 male commissioners. I served as the chief executive officer. At the secretariat, we had 4 directors who were female and 4 directors who were male. I want to take full responsibility and confess my sins. That we deliberately set out to make sure that in terms of numbers, women were equally represented. Did men obviously become inclusive? Going back to the earlier question, I think they consented. They consented to it, but on a more serious note, it made for very interesting conversations, but I am grateful that the men were very well selected, and there was an appreciation that this was about getting the complete story. And so for all of us, it was a learning a learning experience on the language you use, the processes you use, etc. I think I have somehow dealt with the question of culture and human rights, except to say that human rights are universal. And I do not think there is anyone who says that you abandon your culture by adhering to human rights. I think human rights define what culture should be. My challenge with culture, because of my experience with it, is that when the cultural issue is one that allows one person to oppress the other, then culture is static. But so it never changes, because it protects those power relations that we have. But when it liberates you somehow, especially if you are the one in control of the culture, then culture evolves, and very quickly. So I just feel that the challenge we have with culture is somehow we think it is a static thing. So what was our culture in 1963? My friend Agnes is here, so we keep having this joke that there is a very strong culture that men do not enter the kitchen, where I come from. So shock on me when I came here in Canada, but it was a shock that I enjoyed, that as a woman, you can actually sit and the men are in the kitchen. But I would love to see a man who says, my culture says I cannot enter the kitchen. And the wife is gone the whole day, sometimes the whole week, because you're in different cities, and you hold on to your culture and say, culture, men cannot enter the culture, cannot enter the kitchen. But I suppose I could make lots of money if I invented a remote control that you can operate from the kitchen and operate from the sitting room and work in the kitchen. So much for culture.
We'll take a couple more questions, and then that will be it. So if you're thinking you might like to ask a question, now's your time, because we can continue the discussion at the reception. And if you're thinking of having a word with Patricia afterward, please do that at the reception. Let her get there and have some cheese and crackers while we talk. One here and then one over there.
I think earlier on somebody asked the question how many women actually presented their stories. So, and my question is, so that was 2007, I believe this happened. So I'd like to know, my question is now what? If you can just give us some insight on how your culture is evolving, and perhaps if you've undertaken any studies. You talked about studies, which I'm also interested in terms of what the methodology was. You talked about 60% of the women experiencing some sort of violence. So have you done any quantitative studies, or are you looking into that, or qualitative? So these are my burning questions.
Okay. So before Patricia responds, if someone would like to ask a question from there.
Do we have time for both of us to speak?
Yes. I mean, depends. I mean, please be brief.
Yeah, my question, thank you very much for your talk. My question is, how would you describe women's lives in relation to men before the invasion by the British?
Thank you, Patricia, for the talk. Now, the Kenyan TJRC has been fraught with numerous controversies ever since it was incepted. Now, my question is this. Now, it is said that TRCs are capable or present a possibility to secure gender justice for women. Now, my question is now, given the controversies that the Kenyan TJRC has had, to what extent do you think that any real justice for women, especially those who suffered from the post-election violence, will be achieved, especially given that the commission keeps asking for extensions, and up to now there has not been any real report out of it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. In terms of the number of women who appeared before the commission, the individual witnesses would be about 100, and that is an estimate. I can get you the exact figure if you're interested. This is because we went across the country and we took sample stories. So the total number of people who testified would be about 600 as individual witnesses. Of those were the women who spoke in public, were 100. Then we had the women who appeared in the in-camera hearings and the women at the women-only hearings who go into thousands. In terms of studies, yes, they have been quantitative, and many of them have been what we'd call domestic surveys. So you take a sample size. The last one that we did as an organization involved both rural and urban communities, and we tried to get different income brackets and levels of education, etc., etc. If you were to go to the Feeder Kenya website, you'd be able to access some of those studies. In terms of what was the situation of women before independence, I want to tiptoe around that one because there are some of us who romanticize with what the past was, and we all say the good old days. So I must confess that there is a double story. When you listen to stories from communities, they will say that the woman was well respected. And no man, before a man married, he had to first establish a home. And so he brought his wife to a place where he had erected a structure where she was going to live, and the place where she was going to cultivate to get her food was guaranteed. So that if you compare with what happens nowadays, where someone marries you, and when it's time for meals, he asks, so what are we having? And if you have no ready answer, then you get disciplined. So I would say it would appear from some accounts that we hear that there were conversations around responsible manhood, and the man was not about just authority, but he was, literally speaking, the fence around the house. In vernacular, or the like in my mother tongue, and also where I'm married into, a man is called omusacha. Omusacha means the one who he searches. Okay, can someone help me with this? He collects it and he gathers it. Okay, so that is what the man was, and so then a woman's name was about her nursing, about that she gives life. So it would appear to me that if you went back to that, the suggestion is that we were defined by productive roles that we had. But then again, when we are talking about some of the violations that occur, people tell you this is how our grandfathers always did it. So it appears to me that there are certain tensions around what really is happening with the Kenyan Truth Commission. I am tempted to say, can we take the walk with you towards the reception? But just to say, in all sincerity, truth commissions are set up, like the Kenyan process, is set up in a very contested environment. And therefore, although people do not say it openly, everyone has different interests there. competing. It is true that the Kenyan Commission had serious challenges around integrity. But what I have said, and to many people who spoke about the Truth Commission, was I said, it is always about the victims. And it was about giving the victims a platform. And although I myself was frustrated to the point of leaving, I am persuaded that what we have done as a country is provided a basis upon which we can build in terms of transforming our country. So there is now a record of what these violations were. I am extremely proud of the work that we were able to do for the women. Sometimes I say that because the big victims stayed away, it provided the space, it provided room for victims like women who are always marginalized, who are always squeezed out of these processes, to come in and take advantage of the process. So the next steps will be, hopefully the Commission will be releasing its reports in the days to come. I do not think that they will get extensions until Kingdom Come. When that report is issued, I am confident that as we begin to implement it as a country, we shall make steps